Welcome to the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin, where we unpack the strategies and solutions that make localization fast, scalable, and efficient. I'm your host, Stefan Huyghe. Good morning from early in the morning, Dallas, and we're here in the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin with Brett Domeny, Senior Group Product Manager at Webflow, calling in from the Ozarks. Brett, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself real quick to the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Like you mentioned, my name is Brett Domeny. I'm a Senior Group Product Manager at Webflow. I've been here for about 5 years, helping build product and build out a new way to build for the web here at Webflow.
All right, good. So this episode will explore how no-code platforms like Webflow empower teams worldwide to design, build, and scale websites faster while ensuring accessibility, localization, and collaboration across cultures. And we're going to dive into the intersection of product management, internationalization, and the evolving future of global software development. So let's get started right away and talk a little bit about code and no code and what that means in today's software landscape. Brett, what are the biggest misconceptions people have about no code platforms?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great primer. I think, when we look at kind of the timeline of no code platforms, it really started a number of years ago, where no code platforms were only able to do pieces and parts. And when you thought about, I don't want to have to use code, you were able to do little things around the edges. And when Webflow first started, our mission was and still is, we want to give development superpowers to everyone. And so when we think about what success looks like, it's not just we want you to be able to solve a small piece of the pie, but we actually want to give those same development superpowers that are traditionally only available to developers to everyone. And so when we think about the misconceptions around that, oftentimes people or teams can think no code tools means lack of customizability or lack of scale or lack of power. And there's these inherent large trade-offs. And that may have been true back at the advent kind of the space when it first started to be like, oh, what if I could have kind of what you see is what you get, or WYSIWYG kind of platforms, or what can I have visual builders for that? But that's something that we really take deeply as we're building, is that we don't want there to be this big trade-off, is that we want to give development superpowers to everyone. So the no code is just the medium that we're still giving people those same raw capabilities. And so that's often what we hear. The misconception is like, well, I need something more powerful or more scalable or more customizable, thinking that no code may not be it.
Yeah. Well, let's talk for a minute about the scalability. Can no code truly scale to enterprise level global projects, or is it best suited for startups and SMBs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's it really depends company by company in terms of the platform that's building it, because at the end of the day, no code can solve and scale to really the highest of heights and full customizability. Not every company that's building no code first tools has that audience really as their target. And so at Webflow, we often like to think on this like 3 perspective kind of continuum, where we have no code, kind of low code, and then pro code. Because basically, as we go to these larger enterprise customers, which Webflow has seen a growing, product market fit with over the last 4 or 5 years, where we're now serving some of the biggest brands, in the world, are building their platforms on Webflow. They are able to serve most of what they need to do with low code or no code rather. But there are times where the teams say, well, I still have developers that want to do these specialized kind of pieces. And so we build ways for them to have a seat at the table as well. And so, we have really built so that no code is scalable, to the biggest of enterprise organizations. And when you still need some level of composability, being intentional about what we're building. And that, blends a little bit into what we've been talking on today, which is like being intentional about how we're extensible as a platform and building the right types of API hooks and building the right types of abilities for, really best in breed applications to hook into the tool, rather it being either limited in customizability or scale from a platform standpoint.
What role do developers still play in a no-code world? Are they still involved, or is your audience really meant to be outside the development world?
Yeah, it's a great question. We often think, particularly when we're dealing and working with our larger buyers, you know, there's kind of this fear, and fear is not the right word, but there's kind of a perspective of, well, if we go replace development needs with no code, what is the role of developers? And what we often see with these larger teams is that developers have had to be deployed into parts of the business where maybe is not the best outsized impact that those developers can make. And so they're spending hours and hours and hours a week just doing something like maintaining websites and web platforms versus being able to go work on more business critical applications and new development that pushes their core business forward. And so what we've seen is that developers are able to be redeployed within the business and be able to more strategically complement the web, kind of the web side of things, versus marketing teams having to be so reliant. And that's really what we think about when we say give development powers give it development power superpowers to everyone, is that marketers and all kind of those related jobs around that are often the ones that are tasked with driving the car down the road, if you will. They're tasked with owning the web experience, and they're given a seat at the steering wheel, but they don't have the keys, and often they don't have the steering wheel because they're tasked with maintaining, iterating, owning their web presence, but they don't have the tools and abilities to be able to do that because these environments are really built on really custom built, development experiences. And to do anything, to be able to do things like, hey, we want to spin up new pages. Hey, we want to start scaling this out. Hey, we need to go make this change. Hey, we want to spin up a new locale. Is these like long dev heavy processes. And again, rather than developers having to be, kind of the linchpin for operations at these teams that want to just drive the car down the road, they can redeploy developers in. And then that there's times, hey, we need to make sure we've got a key integration to this, this tool or these kind of special custom needs. Great. Developers can like help, attach onto that or extend on the offerings and things like that.
Yeah, it sounds like you're really not looking to sidelight anybody, and you're looking to empower on all levels, not just the developer level, but also maybe in marketing, etc. Of course, our main interest is from the viewpoint of global audiences here at the Agile Localization Podcast. So let's ask you a couple of questions in that regard. How does Webflow approach localization for your users building on Webflow?
Yeah. Well, I think the few points we were just talking through are really good foundations for this, which is we take those same principles and we kind of extend them to localized experience as well, which is one, we want to make sure the scale, the customizability, just the same way if you were going to go custom build a localized site or experience yourself, we want to make sure that you can do that on Webflow, and we want to make sure that it can scale to the levels that our largest customers need. And, kind of the same principle, we want to enable anyone to be able to do it. We want to give those development superpowers to everyone. And so when we've taken some of those strategic inputs to how we support localization, Webflow supports it with a really a robust native offering that we often talk about as end-to-end localization. Because I'm sure you and your listeners are deeply attuned to is when teams think about localization, they often go straight to translation. I just need to translate this content. And that's obviously an important piece of the puzzle, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. When we think about the end-to-end scale of localization, what's needed is we often, even when we're talking with customers, we talk internally, we could draw like a big, orb on the whiteboard, if you will, that says localization, and translation is just a little orb within it. And so when we've built our solution, we often talk about it in kind of three big buckets. One is kind of the design and content localization. And so we want to make sure that when customers come to build their experiences on Webflow, they can truly localize every part of them to be discoverable, to be on brand, to be impactful locale by locale. So starting all the way at the design layer, they are able to design and customize different presentations and different experiences per locale versus just on the translation side. So the idea that how you want your brand to show up in a Western market versus a non-Western market versus specific country, specific locale and region. That's all possible again without having to be reliant on developers to do that. So that's one pillar, is that we enable design and content localization, so you can have unique designs, unique content per locale. The second, which is really kind of a crux here, is we want to make sure that we're supporting very flexible translation. And so however your team needs to be able to translate and localize the actual content, you can do that. So we have some, basic tooling that we've built, and then we have great partnerships and integrations, including here with Crowdin. And then on the last side is all the way at the hosting and delivery side. And so often, teams can do all the first parts, but you still have to figure out, how do I get that published and delivered to the web so that, every visitor and every locale, and that it's, internationalized from an SEO standpoint, or even an AEO as we now go into AI search. Webflow is really solved for end to end. And so we have native one-click hosting that we handle all of that. And so we handle all of that as well with localization. So, automatically out of the box, like localized site maps and all those different pieces. And so, our approach, going back to your root question, our approach is we want to make sure that it's robust end-to-end localization. And so that if you do just want to do basic translation, sure, you can do that. You don't have to do all those pieces. But if you want to go all the way to you're building bespoke experiences and flexible translation and all of that, you can do that with Webflow. And again, going back to our root promise, we want to make sure that you're doing that in such a way that your team that's actually responsible for it can be the ones doing it, that we give those development superpowers to do things like robust localized sites to everyone. So happy to go deeper there as well with you.
Yeah, very interesting. Maybe we can quickly tie that to Crowdin. You guys are using our platform, and how do you see tools like Crowdin fitting into a no-code workflow to streamline localization at scale?
Yeah, absolutely. The big part of this is as we build and support for larger and larger teams in particular, being an extensible platform is critical. And the why is that important is because oftentimes these larger teams have a specific tool set, or they have specific maybe point solutions that they want to use, and they want to make sure that they can bring the best of breed tools, if you will. And so that obviously extends to localization. So when we went out to build this product and we talked to our customers, the area where we saw the most diverse set of needs represented really was on translation. And so there were some customers who said, translation is very basic for me, but there's customers who really I need advanced workflows. I need very specific translation overview process. I need very specific models, all those kinds of pieces. And that for us kind of sent the alarm bells off of, okay, this is a key area that we need to be extensible first. And so as we think about, Crowdin as a platform, that's a key piece. There are many large brands that look to Crowdin to be their translation partner, to make sure that they have specific workflows, they have specific translation sources, they have specific things, and what they need is that they're saying, I want these two things to work really well together. I want to get the design and the content localization, and I want to get all of the one-click hosting and automatic SEO discovery for localization that Webflow offers, and I want to be able to use all the great tools that Crowdin is building on translation, and that's how we've approached it. And so we actually have a great Crowdin app that's in our official app marketplace that customers can download, run easily with their Webflow site and Webflow project, and be pushing translations in and out of Crowdin. And so the reasons again why is really, Crowdin solves for a more long tail and specialized set of needs that Webflow doesn't in this space. And that's where we want to make sure that customers can bring that great level of customizability and advanced workflows on translation, plug those right into Webflow, and build kind of the composable stack that they need without missing a beat.
Yeah. Sounds like you're really running a mature program, much more mature than I see a lot of companies run. So let's ask you one more internationalization question. Maybe how does Webflow handle typography and multi-directionality and maybe some other cultural specific design needs, Arabic and Chinese languages? What's your philosophy on those?
Sure. Yeah. So um, our philosophy there really is a reflection of our kind of raw or root philosophy of how we build. So I often describe Webflow as this is if you ever go to like a hardware store or somewhere where you're going to go, buy things to go build a home project, for example. There's often two parts of that store. One, let's say you're going to build a shed for your backyard, and one, side of the store, you can go buy the shed; it's already built, and you just need to tell somebody where to park it in your backyard. But all the decisions have already been made for you: what the roof's going to look like, what the walls are going to look like, what doors are on it. And then there's the other side of the store where it's just boards and bolts and all the materials, and you get to decide how you want that to be built. And when we think about the web space, and this goes back into the early question around no-code tools, is that particularly earlier on, the trade-off or the downside that people saw is it's always this side of the shop. It's always kind of all the decisions are made for me. It's a very templatized approach. I can't ever really have the customization, but that's been so inherent to how we built at Webflow is we give you the raw tools, and you can make those decisions. So we often build these kind of raw primitives and we let you pull them together. And so when we think about, that root question of how are we going to handle localized typography and localized design and all of these detail things, that there is absolutely no one size fits all answer for every customer to say, oh, well, if you live in this part of the world, this is what we know you're going to want to do on your website. Just the same way that like there's almost no one size fits all for how I'm going to go build something, in my backyard. You mentioned on dialing in from the Ozarks, one of the great things, we've got these big rolling hills. And so when I go to build a backyard project, I'm dealing with like 10 foot of slope. And so if I went and bought a prefabricated shed, that thing's going to be falling off. And that's often how people feel when they buy platforms, is when everything is so templatized, they're having to work around it. And so those raw things that we've built, we enable in, ultimate flexibility down to the root. And so, to kind of unpack a few of those, you mentioned design, and kind of presentation localization. And that's really inherent in the platform. So if you come and build on our platform, and we've got great documentation and videos where you can see all of this come to life at Webflow University, and you can come build in your primary locale. And if you want everything to just be the same throughout, we're just going to automatically inherit that. So every time you make a design choice, I just changed the nav bar and I want that to be across everything, we'll inherit it. But if you as a business have a specific intent to say, but I want it actually different in my, Spanish locale versus my French locale, you're able to go into those locales in a visual first view. Again, our tool, by how we've given development superpowers to everyone, is visual tools. I can see them, I can move them, I can interact with them. So you're able to go interact with the, let's say the Spanish or the French version, and go make those changes to the design. If you want the design to be represented different, if you want to use a different image here, if you want to use different styling, different representation, you can do all of that. Same thing on the typography side. When we're giving you these visual tools, under the hood, we're just giving you access to your CSS, your JavaScript, these foundational building blocks of how you're building, and you can augment those and modify those really however you need. And so we do some things out of the box for languages that we know automatically are right to left versus left to right. So we automatically do some kind of injection within, kind of how the site is built. But you ultimately have the control of all of that because it isn't one size fits all. And so that's a piece that we see resonate with our customers, because often this is the hard part of localizing a site, of like, I got to go figure out how to make all of this come to life. And now the challenges that I've had in a traditional web development world are now, exacerbated because I have 10 times the site that I'm managing. And so now all of that overhead. And so we want to make it easy, but we want to make sure that we never lose sight of, we want to give you the boards and the bolts. We want to give you the raw ingredients so you can make the decisions for your business.
Yeah, that flexibility sounds great. I've been a database developer and FileMaker for over 25 years. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with FileMaker. It's one of the original no-code softwares, and I'm a big proponent of this approach. So agility in product marketing and development, let's concentrate on that for a second, because we are the Agile Localization Podcast. How do you balance long-term vision with immediate feature demands for customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think at the end of the day, for us building products, we have to balance, obviously, kind of two elements to this. One is the kind of the North Star always is, what do our customers need to be successful? And so we often talk about this as, customer obsessed. How do we make sure that we're always dialed in on what customer needs? But then obviously, we have to be mindful of the market. And when we say market, it's not just competitors. Competitors are certainly in that, but also the technology landscape. What tools do we have at our disposal? And so we need to be constantly market aware. And so as we blend those two things together, where we're constantly really making sure we understand what our customers need, what do they need to be more successful? What do prospective customers need to make sure that they can really close, and where are the opportunities we see in the market? I often think about this on two kind of two altitudes with our teams. One is we always want to define and continuously redefine a strategic perspective of where we're going, kind of the North Star, if you will. And it doesn't always have to be perfect, and rarely is it. If you think about, I'm going on a hike, and you've got all these options of where you want to go. What your first step is and what are the immediate things you're doing are important to be able to connect to where we ultimately trying to go. Because if you don't ultimately know where you're trying to go, it can be easy to end yourself on either taking the wrong steps or just kind of taking frivolous steps. So our teams are always anchoring those two perspectives, which is continuing to iterate on where do we think we're going from a North Star standpoint, and it's informed by those two things: customers and the market. And the other is, and what can we do today to make sure we're moving towards that? So sometimes that means we're working on deeper foundational projects, things that take a longer time to build. And other times we're balancing that really with opportunities to make, impact right in the immediate term. And so it's a tricky balance, because you can find yourself only ever doing small things and never really advancing to where you want to go. And you can also easily find yourself only doing the kind of to go to the North Star, we need to take these giant big swings. And just like in baseball, for example, great hitters in baseball only hit, only get on base about a third of the time. So, over 2/3 of the time, they are not getting on base. And that's kind of, when you think about big swings, is much of the time you're having to iterate. It takes longer. And so we really have to balance those. How do we make impacts for our customers today, make their workflows better, solve problems more and more and more, while also making sure we're balancing it with where are we going, which is never more important than now, as AI is completely upended, all parts of the spectrum in terms of how people interact with the web, how they build for the web, what tools do we have that we can build. It's obviously a critical thing.
Yeah. As a product manager, how do you decide when to build versus when to integrate a third-party solution like Crowdin, let's say? And in particular, how do you decide to use Crowdin?
Yeah. So, I'll answer that on kind of two dimensions. One, as Webflow, the platform, as we're building, and then I think second, from a customer standpoint. So, from a Webflow standpoint, we take a extensibility by default approach on everything we build, which is how do we make sure that we are building this in the most extensible way, whether we build extensions ourselves, whether we make sure that they are there should they be needed, whether we want to make sure and go build APIs and connectors. Again, because we know what we know from our customers, again, those two anchors, our customers in the market, is having platforms that are highly extensible and easily extensible is critical. Because often, or I should say rarely, is it that companies are going to just say, well, I've only got one technology tool that does absolutely everything, for my company. It's often they're looking to make sure that they can integrate and connect the right tools. And the language of integration and connection is building the right APIs. And so when we're doing that from our initial design of how we're building solutions, makes it infinitely easier to go think about extensibility strategies. And so when we're thinking about when should we build things versus when should we build integrations, um, you know, a key thing for us is where we look for kind of a balance of high variety of need from our customers. If our customers' need set is very, very spread and it's very, very long tail, that's often a signal of like, we're going to have to make sure we have key partnerships on this front to be able to solve all of the needs for our customer, because the likelihood of us being able to do every part of that spectrum is low, as well as more a specialty kind of needs within an area. And so, specifically for this conversation for Crowdin, that's exactly what led us to this partnership. Is when we were building out localization. Again, we knew that translation and how you manage translation and how you manage translation workflows and what models do you have involved and what review processes do you have involved. That's where the answer was really bespoke for every customer that we talked to. And that's a large surface area for us to go build out. And so that was, again, a signal to us as we put those things together. We already knew we were going to be extensible by default. We knew we needed to build out the right APIs to build partnerships. And then secondarily, when we saw a signal here for translation in particular, and then the third is like we want to partner with the best tools of their kind, and that leads us to our partnership with Crowdin as well. Is that we want to make sure that the top tools in these spaces are able to use. And so that's where we have many shared customers who are able to just say, well, I love using Crowdin and I love using Webflow, or I'm looking to start using Webflow, or maybe the opposite. I really love using Webflow and I need help in this translation space because, I have these long tail set of needs. I have a lot of different models I want to use. I have a lot of different workflows. And we're able to say, well, hey, we've got a great partnership with Crowdin and a turnkey app. Because the turnkey nature is also the critical spot to extend our vision of giving development superpowers to everyone. If we say, well, it's technically possible that you could go integrate with Crowdin, read all of their API documentation, read all of our API documentation. That leads to the same world that a lot of these teams are looking to kind of build velocity out of, which is to say, well, yeah, but I don't want to be reliant on my developers to have to be doing all of this stuff just for our website. I want to redeploy them into the business. And so having great turnkey integrations where you can just quickly, with a click of a button, install a great app for Crowdin, connect it with Webflow, and be passing translations back and forth right into the visual canvas is great. And so that's a really how we think about when to build something versus when to partner. And again, we assume that we're going to need to be extensible by default. And so we're already starting from that perspective, already looking at how do we make sure and strengthen this for our customers because they're the ones that we ultimately need to make sure we do right by.
Yeah. What do you see as the biggest opportunity for Webflow in the next 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think, this goes a lot to where the market is going, where we look at and when I say the market, it's honestly a broader question of where's the web going over the next 5 years? Because we've seen the rapid change in how people consume content on the web, how people search for content on the web, how they interact with the web. We talked about this a little bit at our annual Webflow conf a couple weeks ago. And AI is really changing every facet of that. And so when we think about where do we see Webflow going over the next 5 years, is really where is in kind with where do we see the market going over the next 5 years? Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are still delivering on our core vision, which is we want to give development superpowers to everyone. And so that now, one of the great things about that is, when you think about the how have we done that? We've done that through giving our customers visual tools. That has been kind of the abstraction layer, or the veil between you and code, is I can use visual tools, which is great. But that still requires we have to build those visual tools, and that can get complex, and like making sure that we're moving as fast as our customers need. And when you look at the market now, and you look at what is generative AI, but a veil between you and complex development functions or complex functions. I'm sure maybe many of the listeners here have gone to something like ChatGPT and run a complex action that maybe you couldn't do before, or maybe like, oh, that would have taken me a lot of steps. Or we see kind of the growth in these code gen tools or complex application tools. And the thing that excites us is that AI is a new tool in our tool belt to solve our original vision, which is to give development superpowers to everyone. So we have more tools at our disposal. So where we see this where we see Webflow going, is really a reflection of where we see the market going. And so we need to make sure that we are still giving our customers modern ways. And when I say modern, what role the website plays and when the visitor gets to the website is changing. We've seen that change a lot, and now we're even start seeing the early signals of this. But now, rather than going and doing all these generative searches in a traditional search engine, where I'm kind of going, what's the best place for me to go on vacation this fall? And I'm going to go read through 10 different articles, or what is the best web platform, or what is the best translation tool that I should be using? Rather than having to go through all of this content, AI is obviously creating these answers for me. And so by the time I get to web experiences and direct websites, I'm in a much higher intent, and I'm looking to engage much more deeply. And so where we're going as a platform is to make sure that we can give you the tools to keep up with that. And I think when we think about what's critical for people building localized experiences on the web as well, is that's where building really intentional, captivating digital experiences, while balancing kind of the core needs for being discoverable in an AI world is critical. Because kind of on both sides, if you're not building a site that is easily discoverable and is easily amplifiable as this world is changing, that's a critical gap. And so we want to make sure that we're solving that for our customers. And then the second is, by the time your customer gets to your experience, regardless of locale, you really, it becomes a critical thing that you deliver a really engaging, intentionally curated experience that is different than something that they could have gone, well, I could have more easily gotten the answer from this brand if I would have just stayed on ChatGPT. Like, we don't want as brands, we don't want to be in that world, and be able to make sure we do that. And so is where we see the market going and where we see Webflow going is, we want to continue to give customers more and more development superpowers. We have the ability to do that now more and more through tools in our tool belt with AI, and make sure that as how people consume for the web changes, that we are staying right, really at the forefront of that, with how customers need their digital experiences to evolve.
Brett, you've been very, very generous with your time already this morning. We're slightly over already, but I'm gonna, since this is such a fascinating conversation, I'm gonna dare add one more question, and then we'll part ways with you and send you back to work. How can companies future-proof their global digital presence with Webflow?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and I think that really goes hand in hand with what I was just talking on. Is when you think about what you need to do to future-proof your web presence, often when customers are thinking about how am I being in a world where I am future-proofed, is kind of twofold, I think. One is, how do I set myself up that when I need to make changes, I'm not having to like completely demolish, the structure and rebuild. Because the idea that you can make one change or a set of changes now that are going to hold forever is likely not the case. Assumptions change. We think about like, Google search over the years, like the algorithm, number of changes, even as that kind of matured, it was only changing maybe once a year, critical updates only, a couple times a year. As we see AI models, those are changing every week. And so the idea of, well, what does my site need to be doing to be highly discoverable? It's really not realistic to say, well, I'm going to make one decision and I'm going to make one change and that's going to forever be the change. And so when we think about what are people saying when they say future-proofed, it's really making sure that like you're setting yourself up in a place that when you need to make changes, you can do so quickly. And that goes, to the first part of the podcast, the agile side of this is like, I need to be agile. And the second is you have to be kind of forward facing and constantly be on that edge. And so when we think about how do we make sure that customers are doing that on the localized side, we believe strongly that building the right base and the base structure of how your site is built is the critical side. And so we take that very seriously. So we are constantly evaluating how do things like sitemaps and page structures and database structures need to be built so that we can constantly iterate the best in class of what that means, so that when customers need to say, well, I actually need to come and reconfigure this, we can say, great, here's the tool to do that. And so really kind of those different elements of that, of making sure that the core site structure you're building is really thoughtful, is really intentional. So when you need to make changes, you can do so easily. And so that's a big part of what we've been building, and giving you all the raw tools to do that. And really the other part of that kind of future-proof side is making sure that like you have a partner and a platform that you're building on that you can really partner with, because the idea that any one of us knows exactly where the future is going is obviously not true. And so the more that I think you can have these like strategic thought partners around the table saying, where do we think this is going? What do we think the best move is? If we're going to go expand into the French market, what do we think the best thing is going to need to be? Well, we're going to need to modify our site structure to do this, and we're going to need to plug in the translation tool to that, and we're going to need to go change our design to do that. All those things should be easy. All of those things should be in the hands of the people that are making the decisions. And all of those things should be done in a way that really is can integrate and connect with tools as they change. And so I think as we've been building, we're really thoughtful about that. That goes back to, kind of a through line throughout our conversation, is that we've built the right level of primitives. So at any point you can make changes quickly, but we're also helping you make those changes. So you don't have to do it alone. You don't have to think, oh, wow, how bots are consumed in hosting has changed. I better go spend hours and hours figuring out how to fine tune our hosting stack. Well, no, we're helping you do that through our integrated hosting platform. And so we take that very seriously because we want to make sure that when customers build on Webflow, just as when customers connect with tools like Crowdin, that they are doing so in such a way that they can feel confident. They do have a future-proofed solution that when they need to make changes, they can do so easily, and they have a partner that's working with them to help them figure out what the future means.
Brett, thank you so very much for spending some time with us this morning and explaining the no-code approach of Webflow. It was fascinating. We wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and thank you again for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, folks, that's a wrap on today's episode of the Agile Localization Podcast by Crowdin. We hope you found it as insightful as we did. If you enjoyed today's conversation and want to learn more about how leading companies are managing their multilingual content efficiently, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Thank you for tuning in. For more resources on how to streamline your localization process, visit crowdin.com. See you next time.